Hi everyone, hope you're okay. Welcome to our final week's reading session for this half term. I will be continuing with the reading sessions for as long as this home learning continues. So definitely for the first 2 weeks after the holidays, but I won't be doing it next week, okay? So this week we are focusing on keeper of the coasts and oceans. We are going to focus on all sorts from looking at the beach and how we recycle stuff that we use on the beach, ocean pollution, the perils of plastic, so how plastic affects those poor sea creatures, how fishing can affect the dying population of some of those fish, and more plastic attacks, coral reefs and how they're affected, and what we can do on the beach as well. So we'll make a start. I will share my screen for today's session. So I will just get it on the bigger screen. Right, so keeper of the coasts and oceans. Oceans are awesome. They contain over 96% of the world's water and provide homes and food for billions of creatures. Oceans are also a vital part of the water cycle and help to control the climate and weather around the planet. Keepers are needed to protect these unique and delicate habitats. So when you describe something as delicate, it means it can easily be broken. Oceans are packed with life, from the most microscopic, which means tiny, plankton, to the blue whale, the largest creature ever to have lived on Earth. The Census of Marine Life has identified about 250,000, which is 250,000 species living in the oceans, but it's thought there are many, many more. Oceans absorb, so that means take up, more than half of the heat that reaches Earth from the sun. Their currents run for thousands of kilometres, distributing their warmth around the world. So the currents is the flow of the water. And some people say, oh, you can't swim in that area because there are strong currents. That means that the currents and the movement of the water is that strong. You could be either dragged further out to sea, or the currents could go further down, so you're dragged down and you can't swim back up. Around 90% of all the world's trade, goods and raw materials are carried by ship. You can see that ship on the top right is one of those cargo ships, which cargo means packaging and supplies, and they travel all the way across the world with lots and lots of different supplies for us to have in our country and from our country to other countries. Around 90 million tons of fish and seafood are hauled out of the oceans every day. So that's brought out of the oceans. You can see the little fishing boat there. CO2 dissolves in water, and oceans take up a large amount of CO2 from the atmosphere. Without them, the pace of global warming would be far faster. And we said, didn't we, that we don't want too much CO2 in the ocean. In the atmosphere, because it is really dangerous for us and it does make the world hotter. And what it's saying here is that the ocean actually is a really good defense against it and actually soaks a lot of it up. And if we didn't look after our oceans, then we'd be in a lot of a worse situation. The sea is an important source of leisure and fun. Some island countries, such as the Maldives and the Bahamas, rely on seaside tourism for between 1 to 2/5 of their entire income. That's like 40%. Wow, nearly half. Ocean pollution. Oceans are beautiful places, but they have been used as watery dustbins for centuries. When fewer people lived on the Earth, the oceans could cope, but today's booming human numbers and large industries are having a serious impact. Impact meaning effect. Pesticides, and again, we've spoken a lot about pesticides when we looked at the farmers and the chemicals that they put on their vegetables to keep the animals off, but the pesticides and the chemicals end up damaging the environment. According to the US National Ocean Service, 4/5 of the population that reaches the oceans comes from land, of the pollution, 4/5, so you're talking 80% of the pollution that reaches the ocean comes from land. This includes large amounts of pesticides washed from farmlands, into rivers, into the ocean. So it's a much bigger effect than what we thought. Dead zones. In many parts of the world, human waste is piped straight into the sea. The sewage can create dead zones, areas of ocean containing little or no oxygen, meaning that hardly any life can survive there. So think about all of those fish and other animals that live around the surrounding areas of the ocean. Chemicals. Some industries deposit waste directly into the sea. It may include dangerous chemicals such as lead, mercury, and various acids. Drain damage. Other pollution that reaches the ocean includes vehicle oil and bleaches dumped down drains. It's terrible, isn't it? Absolutely terrible. There's poor fish at the bottom there, what they've got to put up with. Sick slicks. We're going to go on to the next page before we read the stuff at the bottom. Oil spills occur from ships, oil tanker accidents, leaking pipelines and underwater oil wells. Many are small, but some can be large and deadly to wildlife. And sometimes you see dolphins and other large birds that are washed up, unfortunately, to the shore, and they're absolutely covered in oil. And what it does is it suffocates them, and it also tangles all of their fur with oil, and that means that they can't fly because they're too heavy, or they can't swim because they are covered in oil. And the way that they adapt, they're not made to be around oil, and it kills a lot of the sea creatures and the animals, unfortunately. If oil is swallowed, it can kill many types of sea creatures. Oil sticks birds' feathers together, preventing them from flying. Oil on fern feathers stops their insulating power. The effect, creatures often die of extreme cold. So when it means insulation, that means keeping the warm in, and their bodies are built to keep the warm in. However, the oil interrupts that and stops it, and that means that the cold does get in and they die from being extremely cold. Oil floats can block out sunlight, meaning that plankton and underwater plants can't make food. When it washes up on the coast, oil can contaminate, that means affect, more living things. It can also kill plant life, whose roots bind the soil together. Without the plants, soil can be more easily eroded, so that means taken apart. Big build-up. This diagram shows how pollution can affect ocean food chains. Okay, let's start off. Number one, those little bits with little eyes there that you can see. Plankton in seawater absorb the polluting chemicals as they feed. Okay, so the chemicals are in the water and they absorb it as they feed. And they're tiny. Then come along, they're eaten by large quantities of small fish and other creatures. The poisonous pollutants that are in the plankton are now in those small fish bodies because they've just eaten that plankton, which has just absorbed all of that poisonous chemical. 3, larger predators come along, such as bigger fish and squid. They eat the smaller fish and marine creatures. The poisonous chemicals can collect in their bodies faster than their bodies can break it down. And then we've got it, so they're in the squid now. A large sea creature such as a shark can contain a concentration of these harmful chemicals several million times higher than those found in the waters in which they live, which is dreadful. So what they're saying is, because of the stuff that they are having, the sharks that they're eating, because the prey that they're eating is already full of these awful chemicals, they will have really bad chemicals in themselves, almost so that it is worse than the water that they originally got it from, which is absolutely terrible. Really sad, actually, because if you think about it, everyone, whose fault is that? Is it the sea creature's fault? No. Is it the ocean's fault? No. Is it the sun's fault? No. Is it our fault? Yes, and we need to do something about it. Okay, I would love to read on, but I am going to split this across the 4 days that we have got. Tomorrow we will focus on the perils of plastic, and I'm actually going to keep that on there for the whole session, and we're going to have quite a big discussion about the effects of plastic. I'm hoping that I'll be able to find you a video to also go along with this. Wednesday, we're going to look again at plastic attack, further information regarding plastic and how we can tackle it. Then on Thursday, we will then look at further marine life and how it's affecting them in the ocean. and how fishing affects them. And we'll also look at coral reefs and a day at the beach as well. And then once we finish that, we'll look at the news round for Thursday. So some sessions are going to be larger than others, but they'll all round about be about 10 minutes. Okay, I hope that you've enjoyed today's session. It is full of a lot of really terrifying facts, to be honest with you. There doesn't seem to be any positives there at the moment. But I think it's more for us to gain an awareness of how bad plastics and pollution are for the environment, and also that we have a lasting effect on the wider world. So even though we think about maybe flushing down something down the toilet or down the drain that we know is not a great chemical, we think, oh, it's gone now, it's gone down the drain. But if we ever stop thinking, oh, well, where does that drain actually go to? Because it doesn't just disappear. And as you can see here, it eventually ends up in the oceans, and these poor animals, these innocent creatures, end up suffering the effects of us, really, just purely because we're not recycling and getting rid of things the best way we should do, and using things that are easy rather than environmentally friendly. Okay, have a great Monday, everyone. Have a quick discussion with the people in your group about what you've learned from these couple of pages, because it is really interesting, and maybe something new that you've learned from these pages, or did you already know it? And for those people at home, you know, have a think to yourselves as well. If you want to jot any ideas down or do any further research about ocean pollution, I would be more than happy to have a look at it. If you email help email, or if you're in school, pass it to me. I know that quite a lot of girls in year 5 have done some great research on last week's pollution lessons, and I'm going to mention that in our reading assembly on Thursday. So have a great Monday, everyone. I will see you at the same time on Tuesday. Bye.